Hello, and thank you for joining the Center for Financial Security for our webinar today, the COVID-19 Crisis and Student Loans, a webinar event for borrowers and practitioners. My name is Hallie Leinhart. I am the Assistant Director of the Center for Financial Security here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Just to give everyone a bit of a rundown on our agenda today, the webinar will run for approximately an hour and a half, so ending at about 11:30 a.m. Central Time, which gives us a full 90 minutes for presentations and Q&A. We will begin the webinar with some opening remarks by a member of the Wisconsin Coalition on Student Debt, and she'll introduce herself shortly. We will then hear presentations from Ascendium Education Solutions, first providing some real-world stories and impacts of the current COVID-19 crisis on borrowers, and then giving a bit of a 101 course on the COVID-19 crisis and student loans. We will then hear from the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protections on some scams that have circulated and how to identify and respond to those. Next, Ascendium will provide information for where borrowers should turn. Following the presentation, we will have time for Q&A, and so please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar in the question box located on the right side of your screen. Please note that the webinar is being recorded. We will post the recording on our website and the slides as well within one business day. I'm very excited to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. We have Connie Hutchinson. She's the Executive Secretary of the State of Wisconsin Higher Education Aids Board. We have Brendan Shaughnessy. He's Manager of Call Center Operations at Ascendium Education Solutions. Beth Erickson is Vice President of Repayment Solutions at Ascendium Education Solutions. Benjamin Lee is Associate Counsel at Ascendium Education Group, and Laura Sutherland is Administrator of the Division of Trade and Consumer Protection at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. Thank you all for being here. And with that, we will get started, and I will turn it over to Connie Hutchinson.
Hi, this is Connie, and thank you all for joining us today and for your interest in the challenges facing many of those with student loan debt. I'm the Secretary of the Higher Educational Aids Board, and we are the agency that administers and oversees state financial aid for Wisconsin students. Many of you attending this webinar are practitioners who work with borrowers struggling with student loan debt and are looking for guidance and assistance. And some of you are debt holders yourselves. This seminar, hosted by the Wisconsin Coalition on Student Loan Debt in collaboration with Ascendium Education Solutions Incorporated, is designed to provide important information about student loans during the COVID-19 crisis and beyond, and also to put you in touch with needed resources. The Wisconsin Coalition on Student Debt was founded by Laura Sutherland, the Director of the Division of Trade and Consumer Protection at the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, and also by John Wedge, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Education Association Council Region 6. Laura and John serve as board members of the coalition, along with Carol Trone, the co-director of the Fair Opportunities Project. The Wisconsin Coalition on Student Debt is a nonprofit organization representing a range of concerned organizations and stakeholders who seek to increase clarity around the key issues of student debt, college affordability, and loan repayment. One of these organizations is Ascendium Education Solutions, a nonprofit organization that serves as a student loan guarantor. Ascendium provides student debt counseling, financial literacy information, and student success tools. Their philanthropy includes a focus on helping more people from low-income backgrounds achieve their post-secondary and workforce training goals. I would like to acknowledge the Secretary of Financial Institutions, Kathy Blumenfeld, who is on this webinar today. Secretary Blumenfeld is the chair of the Student Debt Task Force, which was created by Governor Evers. Under her leadership, I am confident this task force will develop recommendations that will help many Wisconsin student debt holders. I would also like to acknowledge Wisconsin State Treasurer Sarah Godlewski, who brought the issue of student loan debt into focus during the 2018 campaign. Treasurer Godlewski highlighted the impact this debt has on borrowers and the larger effect it has on the state's economy when debt precludes people from buying a home, buying a car, and really from participating in Wisconsin's economy. As Hallie mentioned, we have an information-packed agenda today, and at this point, I am going to turn it over to Brendan Shaughnessy of Ascendium to get us started.
Thank you, Connie. And this is Brendan Shaughnessy from Ascendium Education Solutions. I'm the manager of our call center operations, and I'm going to talk a little bit now about our outreach during the COVID-19 period and the things we've learned from talking to Wisconsin students. And Haley, if you could advance the slide. So our team, our repayment support division, consists of 20 highly experienced success coaches, and we have the average tenure of this team is about 7 years. It's a group of individuals we've assembled with a really wide range of experience in the student loan industry that are able to help out the population of students that we're working with here. And obviously, the working with federal loans, it was a big change for us when the CARES Act was passed, and it suspended all of the federal student loans, and we had to pivot and change the direction we were working in to address the CARES Act. And we began very early in the month of April doing outreach on behalf of our partnering colleges and universities once we had our call centers transitioned to a work from home setting. We were a bit hesitant at the onset to reach out. We didn't really know with the students how the calls would go over, how they'd be received during this period, as certainly folks had a lot of things on their mind at this time. And but our primary goal was to reach out and just make students aware of the CARES Act and how it will impact their student loans, and just to make ourselves available to let them know that we're still here and that we can answer any questions that students may have about their loans. And next slide. And we are really focusing on two different populations right now that we've started our outreach towards, and these are borrowers that are coming out of their grace period for the first time. So these are borrowers that are entering repayment and just starting their road to repayment on their student loans. And then the other population are those borrowers that were previously past due at the time of when the CARES Act was applied and all the federal loans were suspended. And with this population, we recognize that these were students that were having difficulty with repayment and prior to this, and that the CARES Act, while it may give them some temporary relief, wouldn't really do a lot for them to address their long-term difficulties that they may have been experiencing. Next slide. Thank you. And as of when we ran data down, so this was as of May 20th, we had spoken to over 4,000 borrowers, 4,033 borrowers, and 39.3% of them were from our partnering schools right here in Wisconsin. Next slide. And so what we've learned from talking to the students was really quite eye-opening to us. So we learned right off the bat that that really a lot of people didn't have a good awareness to the CARES Act and what it all entailed, and that it had been passed at all. There are a lot of students out there that are facing a lot of difficulty right now, and unexpected difficulty, as there's been a lot of employment changes, and folks that may have not struggled with repayment ever have all of a sudden found themselves in a spot where they're either unemployed or underemployed, and it's been posing some new difficulties to them. To date, the response to our outreach efforts has been just overwhelmingly positive. People are really happy that we're calling. They're happy to take some time and talk to our team about what's going on with their loans, and share some of their long-term concerns, and what they're dealing with in their life, and kind of what the COVID-19 period has meant to them and how it's impacted their life. We have a lot of people, as I mentioned, that are really dealing with a change in income situation, and they're not in the same situation that they used to be. And one of the things that we've learned is that a lot of people right out of the gate were trying to get in touch with their servicers to address this situation and figure out how they were going to deal with their loans, and they had a lot of difficulty getting through to their servicers. I think that across the industry, as we all kind of had to pivot, and certainly a lot of companies were all moving employees to working from home and similar, there were points where, especially with the major federal servicers, that it became very difficult to get a hold of them. And we were experiencing hold times sometimes of up to 2 hours it would take to get through to some companies, which is it's an awful long time to sit on hold. But our team has been able to answer a lot of the questions that people have, and share the information that we have about the CARES Act with them, and the suspension, and how it's all going to work, and the timeline that's in front of them. And it's just a continued pattern of just great and positive feedback we're hearing from people. And I think it's the suspension is really taking a lot of weight off of people's shoulders when they've got a lot of other things and a lot of other debts and bills that they have to worry about, that they've got a sense of relief just knowing that they don't need to worry about their student loan for this temporary period. And as we were going through this, if you want to go to the next slide, Haley, we prompted our team to gather some testimonials from the borrowers that they were speaking to, and just grab a synopsis of some of the conversations that they were having. And I've assembled a few of those here that I think were really just representative of the kind of calls that we're having with people. Next slide. And specifically, we've gathered some that are right here from Wisconsin. And so these are all testimonials from our Wisconsin students. And this first one comes from a student named Lauren. And at the time we spoke to her, Lauren was unemployed and didn't know how she was going to make her student loan payments. After we talked through the CARES Act with her, she was very happy and relieved to learn that she didn't have to worry about her payment right now. She asked a lot of great questions about repayment plan options, and options that are available once the suspension ends at the end of September. And at the end of the call, she sounded confident in knowing that she'll be able to choose the right plan for her situation. And she was relieved that she could call us back at any time to get assistance when she does need help. Next slide. And the next testimonial comes from a student named Ben. And Ben shared what a hard time he's been having finding a job due to the pandemic. Certainly for those entering the workforce for the first time coming out of college, it's recognizably a very hard time to get into the workplace. And he too is very grateful about the benefits of the CARES Act, and was afraid that he may need help beyond the end of the suspension at September 30th. We discussed lower payment options with him, such as graduated, extended graduated, and IDR repayment options, and he said he would keep in contact and ask for help. And he went on to express that it was a huge weight that had been lifted off of his shoulders. Next slide. Okay. The next testimonial comes from a student named Doria, and Doria is a healthcare worker who admitted that she was super stressed out amidst the pandemic. She happened to have taken the day off on the morning we talked to her, and for her words, she thought it was fate because one of the things on her to-do list was to get things squared away with her loan payments. We informed her about the CARES Act and the current payment suspension, and again, she was very thankful knowing that this was one less thing that she was going to have to worry about, and she could go back to focusing on her job and her patients that she was working with. And the next testimonial comes from a student named Taylor, and Taylor recently lost her job due to the pandemic and is unsure how long it's going to take for her to find another. Again, one of the things that we've been hearing over and over is it's just for those that are seeking employment, maybe employment after college or re-employment, trying to find a new job if they might have been laid off. It's just a very difficult time to get back into the workplace. And after telling her about the CARES Act, she was grateful for the news and said she plans to call us in October when the suspension period ends. And at that time, she'll make arrangements for a repayment plan that'll fit her employment situation. And we have one from Sarah, a student named Sarah, and Sarah also lost her job due to the coronavirus and recently filed for unemployment. She said that she can no longer afford her student loan payment, and she was relieved to hear about the CARES Act. She really wanted to go back to school and doesn't want to have her delinquent loan hanging over her head when she does so. And the next testimonial comes from a conversation with a student named Jenna. And Jenna had been ill last year in her last year of college, and she's gotten past that and ready to return to school, but her delinquent loan was weighing heavy on her mind, and she had not previously heard about the CARES Act at all, nor how it would help her to level set her delinquency. She thanked us for her help and said that not having the delinquent loan meant just one less thing that she was going to have to worry about now when she could focus on re-enrolling in classes. And so that's just kind of a snapshot of the conversations we're having every day, and they're really all we're hearing the same things over and over and over. And the big things are just that a lot of students aren't aware of the CARES Act and that this suspension has been applied on their behalf. And we know in recent times a lot of the servicers have taken to a more substantial outreach effort to get the information out to the students, but we continue to encounter the same, where we're still finding that most of the people we're talking to just have no idea that their payments are suspended, and they're really relieved to learn that this is out there for them as they're struggling with a lot of other hardships right now. And that wraps up my section here. So I will pass it on.
All right. Thanks, Brendan.
You bet.
Morning, everyone. This is Benjamin Lee from Ascendium. So a great segue from Brendan. So I'm going to be talking about the ins and outs of the relief available for borrowers with student loans during this pandemic. And believe it or not, June 2nd was actually only a week ago from today. You can go to the next slide, Hallie. Thank you. So a quick agenda about what we're going to cover today. We'll talk about loan programs, holders, and loan types, and then get into the loan relief that's available for each one of those sort of classifications. So all the loans that the Department of Education holds, commercial FFEL loans, institutionally held Perkins loans, and then, of course, private loans. And then I'll have a couple of resources on the slide for you at the end And then later on in the presentation, some colleagues will be giving you more detailed and even better information on different resources you can turn to for navigating student loan relief during the pandemic. So loan programs, loan holders, and loan types. You can go to the next slide, Hallie. And the next one. Thanks. So this first slide here is probably the most important to understand when trying to figure out what relief is available for either your student loans or someone that you might be working with, because the loan holder really determines the type of relief available right now, which isn't always sort of the classification that determines how to approach student loans, but for pandemic relief, it does. So the first program, and by far the biggest, we're talking 84% of the federal student loan portfolio, is direct loans. So these are loans that the lender is the Department of Education. The lender is the federal government. So the loan holder there is the Department of Education. Next, we have Federal Family Education Loans, or FFEL loans. I promise I'm going to try to keep acronyms to a minimum, but also I'm going to promise that I'll probably slip up and say some, so just bear with me. So those are FFEL loans. The holders there are typically lenders, so banks, credit unions. It can be national all the way down to extremely local, but also confusingly, the Department of Education holds some of these loans. So a split there. Next, we have Perkins Loans. Typically, these are all loans that schools make to their students, and then they hold them. But the Department of Education has also found themselves holding some of these loans as well. So Perkins Loans can have institutions as holders, but also the department. And then private loans. So these are not federal loans, these are just private loans. And lenders are the holders. So these can be, huge international banks. It can be small local credit unions. Those are the holders for private loans. Another wrinkle on top of this in the relatively confusing student loan space is that servicers handle loans for these holders. So a single servicer, say a Navient or a Nelnet, they might handle all of these types of loans, and a borrower might have all of these types of loans with one or more servicers. A borrower could even have FFEL loans, some of which are held by lenders, some of which are held by the department, and that are serviced at the same at the same servicer. So you can see where this is a pretty confusing area to navigate for a borrower who's trying to figure out what sort of relief is available. So again, think about understanding the loan holder. That's going to be key to unlocking what relief is available for the borrower. Moving on to the next slide, loan types. Normally when I give a presentation on student loans, I have to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 slides and a bunch of time going over all the different loan types because there's so many out there. So these are just some terms that get thrown around for federal loans. Luckily for all of us today, I actually don't have to spend that much time on these because the loan type doesn't really affect the sort of pandemic relief that is available. Again, that is really the loan holder. So lucky for all of us, you guys don't have to hear me go on and on about all these different loan types and the sort of benefits and programs available for each one. So now that we've broken out the kinds of holders that there are, we'll get into ED held loan relief. So that's on the next slide or two, Haley. The relief here comes from what Brendan was mentioning, the CARES Act, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That got signed into law on March 27th. And then also some guidance from the Department of Education that came out on April 3. So that is where all of this relief stems from. So that relief, again, this is just for ED held loans. For non-defaulted borrowers, it's quite the sort of menu of relief here. So there's a temporary payment suspension. There is a temporary 0% interest rate. Payment application is different than it would typically be because there is no running interest during this time. Your borrower's credit reporting is going to look very different than it normally would based on the CARES Act. Status reporting will also be different. in terms of whether a borrower is showing up as in school or in repayment. And borrowers will be receiving quite a few notifications about the relief that they're receiving. And you notice that I said temporary a couple times there. I'm not just trying to fill a slide. It's important to note that all of this relief is scheduled to end September 30th. So that's actually coming up a lot faster than we probably think here. And as of right now, the political winds don't suggest that there's going to be another round of relief anytime soon. So as of right now, I would plan on all of these things ending on September 30th. For folks that are more familiar with this industry, people are a little bit nervous about the end of the relief in terms of borrowers being out of touch with servicers and not sort of paying attention to their loans and what that might mean as they drop back into regular repayment. So really want to stress that these are all temporary measures. So on the next slide, going over this payment suspension, you heard Brendan mention this. This is huge for borrowers. It is absolutely automatic. Borrowers do not need to do anything. They have no payments due from the 27th all the way to September 30th. And if the borrowers have made any payments since March 13th, which is when the president declared a national emergency, they can request a refund of that payment from their servicer. Important to note that refund is not automatic. They have to request it. And even better, icing on the cake for this payment suspension is that these suspended payments will still count towards loan forgiveness if other requirements are made or met. So that includes public service loan forgiveness, income-driven repayment plans, which I unhelpfully abbreviated as IDR on this slide, and any other relief that borrowers might be working towards that require regular payments, like teacher loan forgiveness. These missed payments count. Pretty cool benefit for borrowers. The 0% interest rate. So no interest will accrue during this entire period. And again, this is automatic. A borrower does not need to do anything. For those of you with older loans, like maybe, I know the loans I have, there are some loans that have interest rates approaching 7-8%. That's a substantial benefit for 6 months. So another great benefit for borrowers. The payment application. So on the next slide, we're talking about how payments can go straight towards principal. Typically under the Higher Education Act, federal student loan payments have to go to outstanding interest first. Only then can you reach down and start paying down principal. But see, during this time, no interest is running. So for borrowers that are in a financial position to make payments, this is actually a great time to start chipping away at your student loans. Now, I know that that's a luxury many of us can't even imagine, but for those of us listening or for borrowers who have jobs that have been unaffected and their financial situation allows, great time to throw extra money or at least still make regular payments on their student loans. Something I want to point out that I probably glossed over a little bit earlier too, borrowers can absolutely opt out of this pause in payments. And you're probably wondering why a borrower would do that. In general, the only couple of good reasons I can think of are for a borrower who's maybe going through the house hunting process or some other, looking for a mortgage or some other financial instrument, and they don't want to have their credit report, jeopardize anything. Otherwise, borrowers that are in auto pay and just want to continue making payments, no reason to change anything. All right, so sorry for the little aside there. Next, we'll get to credit reporting adjustments. So even though the borrower is in a suspended status for 6 months, servicers are required to show that the borrower is making regularly scheduled monthly payments. Credit reporting should not show that the borrower is in a forbearance or deferment, and it should not negatively impact credit scores. But unfortunately, these credit models are proprietary and are not really transparent. But in general, borrowers should not be seeing their credit scores dropping due to this suspension. I put a slide on here about status reporting. This is important because when borrowers are in school, they are at least half time. For federal student loans, they're automatically in what's called an in-school deferment, and they don't have to make payments on their student loans. So what the department is going to do here is that they will keep reporting borrowers as in school or as an in-school deferment for as long as the borrower is not reported as withdrawn by the school. So if a school had to close because of the pandemic, or a borrower had left the school because of the pandemic, until that school starts reporting the borrower as officially withdrawn, that borrower will still be reported as in school, and they will not drop into regular repayment on their student loans. Pretty big deal for borrowers that are still in school and are trying to figure out if they're going back, if their school is opening. This gives them a little bit of additional breathing room. On the next slide, I just wanted to go over borrower notifications. So under the CARES Act, servicers are required to send a written notification explaining everything that I just kind of explained to y'all. And the first notices should have been sent mid-April for me from my servicer. That looked like an email that I got on April 9th, I believe. And it was very informative, just laid out all the benefits and told me what to do if I wanted to opt out, but I didn't have to do anything. I would encourage all borrowers to make sure that their contact information is up to date with their servicer. If it's not, they probably never got notification that this was even happening. And then on the back end of this suspension, beginning on August 1st, the department's going to send out at least 6 notices to each borrower, notifying them of when regular payment obligations are going to resume, and that'll be a mix of mail, email, or phone calls. So borrowers should have ample notification that regular repayment is going to pick back up. Again, that's only true if their contact information is up to date. So it's always important to make sure that their servicers are able to get in touch with borrowers. So for defaulted borrowers, everyone we just talked about, all the relief we talked about previous, that's for borrowers who are in, regular repayment, who are non-defaulted. For defaulted borrowers, there is a temporary halt in collections. Again, that goes all the way until September 30th, just like the other benefits under the CARES Act. This halt in collections means no wage garnishment, no offset from tax refunds or Social Security. And payments that are taken during that time will be automatically refunded. So even if the borrower gets garnished or somehow offset, those payments should be coming back to the borrower sooner rather than later. For these borrowers, the interest rate is also set to 0. And any missed payments that they've made under a rehabilitation plan is a way for a borrower to cure a defaulted loan and get back into good standing and have the default removed from their credit history. Any missed payments on a rehabilitation plan do not break that rehabilitation plan. They don't count against it, which is different than how it normally works. And missed payments towards reestablishing eligibility for additional student loans will also not reset progress during this time. Similarly, if a borrower is trying to qualify for a consolidation, missed payments in that pursuit do not reset progress. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but for once it's on purpose. The benefits begin March 13th, but again, set to end September 30th, 2020. Hopefully borrowers understand that this temporary halt in collecting on their defaulted loans is exactly just that, temporary. On the next slide, I've got a couple places you can go to find out about federal student loans. So the big one is NSLDS. That should be a good hyperlink for you there. A borrower can go there and see every type of federal loan that they have once they log in, who holds it, how much they owe, and even the contact information for the servicer. So it's super informative. If using the internet is not your thing, a borrower can call that number there and get in touch with ED's Federal Student Aid Information Center and get information about their loans there as well. All right, on the next slide, we're going to be going into commercial FFEL loan relief. So now we are away from ED-held loans. So unfortunately, the CARES Act does not apply to these borrowers. The relief here only is available via this April 3rd guidance from the department, and then from pre-existing regulations. So for these non-defaulted borrowers, lenders may temporarily suspend payments via forbearance. They may also temporarily lower interest rates, and they may continue reporting a borrower's status, similar to how the department decided, was told to do so under the CARES Act. So that's a lot of mays. Nothing is really required here. So that means that it's not uniform, which makes it confusing for borrowers. Some lenders and servicers are doing these things, some are not. If a borrower has not received relief automatically, really what they need to do is just contact their lender or servicer and see what sort of relief is available. So again, for these commercial FFEL borrowers, they should qualify for what's called a disaster forbearance, and they may also qualify for some other type of forbearance or deferment based on their financial or employment situation. Now, some servicers and lenders are applying these disaster forbearances proactively to all delinquent accounts. So that basically means that the second a borrower is too late on a monthly payment, they will just automatically apply this forbearance, and that means that the borrower will be brought current and they will not default. They will not start moving towards default. Outstanding interest may capitalize at the conclusion of that disaster forbearance, and it likely will capitalize at the conclusion of any other forbearance or deferment type the borrower may qualify for. I did mention already, forbearance means that a delinquent account is going to be brought current. That's something kind of unique to federal student loans. Again, if this hasn't happened automatically, a borrower really needs to contact their lender or servicer. In the absence of any relief, borrowers absolutely can still default. Commercial FFEL borrowers can still default during this time. The numbers are way, way down because of all the proactive relief that's been applied, but not everyone is doing that. So default is still possible. So borrowers need to kind of stay on top of their loans and understand what is happening or what is not happening in terms of relief. On the next slide, talking about defaulted commercial FFEL borrowers. All this relief, again, stems from that April 3 guidance from the department. There's a temporary halt in all collections, so this kind of mirrors what we see in the CARES Act. This means wage garnishment, tax offset, Social Security offset will not occur during this time and won't start up again until September 30th. And that missed payments during a rehabilitation plan or a satisfactory repayment agreement will not disrupt resolutions for those sort of paths towards taking care of a default. The next slide is probably looking very familiar, and I'm not just trying to beef up my slide deck. It's the exact same one you saw before, but that's just because the information is still true. These are federal student loans, so a borrower can learn everything that they need to about them by going to NSLDS or by calling the Federal Student Aid Info Center. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about consolidation. If a borrower wants to get into the direct loan program, they can consolidate loans and get a direct consolidation loan, and then they will qualify. That new loan qualifies for all the benefits available to ED-held loans. So some things to consider if a borrower is weighing that approach. The loans that they're consolidating can absolutely be in default, but those loans get an 18.5% fee added onto their balance. The interest rate of that new loan is a weighted blend of the underlying loans, so it's not usually super detrimental or beneficial to consolidate, especially if a borrower's loans are, in terms of interest rate, if a borrower's loans are fixed rate. We do know that for variable rate loans, those rates are dropping pretty significantly starting July 1, so it might be in a borrower's best interest to wait if they have variable rate loans. Any outstanding interest on the underlying loans capitalizes, and any forgiveness counters, so working towards teacher loan forgiveness or IBR forgiveness, income-based repayment forgiveness, those counters reset because it's a new loan that pays off the old loans. Getting into a direct loan, which is an ED-held loan, can open up access to public service loan forgiveness and more generous IDR plans. And for more information about consolidation, there's a link there that you can go to and learn all about sort of the pros and cons and how it works. Next, I'm going to be talking about institutional held Perkins loans. So Perkins loans, full disclosure, I am not an expert on Perkins loans. The first two loans that loan holders and loan types we talked about, I could talk to you about them all day. Perkins, I don't know as much about. However, these are loans that are normally made by schools to their students. All the relief available during the pandemic for these, just like the commercial FFEL, comes from ED's April 3 guidance. And just like commercial FFEL, in general, the best advice here is borrowers need to contact their servicer or institution to see what relief is available, because really nothing is required. Loan holders for these may provide a 0% interest rate. They may stop required payments. They may grant forbearance for up to 6 months if a borrower cannot make payments due to the pandemic. But these are all permissive. They are not required. So it's not uniform. For defaulted borrowers with these loans, an institution may stop collection activities until September 30th, but they are not required to. So again, borrowers really need to stay on top of and understand who holds their loans to know what kind of relief is available. And if relief hasn't been applied automatically and they need something, having a tough time making payments, they need to contact their servicer, figure out what's available. And I put the link for NSLDS here again, because just want to reiterate, knowledge is power. NSLDS has all the information on federal student loans a borrower would ever need to address their student loan situation. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about private loan relief. So similar to commercial FFEL and institutional held Perkins, the CARES Act does not touch on private loans at all. So again, the best advice here is that if something hasn't been done proactively by the holder or the servicer, a borrower should reach out to the servicer and see what type of relief is available. Now, many lenders in the private loan space are offering benefits. Many of them have come to agreements with a host of states. And I gave you a link to an example there for Massachusetts on the benefits and sort of what they will do during this pandemic and for how long in terms of benefits for their borrowers. Just because one state has advertised this agreement with some lenders doesn't mean that it's only for borrowers in that state. If you hold, like this is just an example, if someone has a Discover private loan and Discover has reached an agreement with Illinois to provide benefits X, Y, and Z, I would say that a borrower from Wisconsin calling Discover probably has a pretty good shot of getting those same benefits if they ask for them. Options here may include a 3 months forbearance, no late payment fees, no negative credit reporting. I haven't seen a lot of private loan relief that goes more than 3 months. So we're already kind of getting close to the end of that 3 months. Whether this is going to be extended or lenders will, lengthen the amount of time that they provide benefits, kind of yet to be seen. One nice benefit from the CARES Act is that everyone, all of us, can access our free credit reports weekly all the way through April 2021. And there is the link to the actual free non-scammy annual credit report website. So a borrower can't look on NSLDS for private student loans since that's a federal database, but they absolutely can and should look at their credit reports to see who they owe, how much, see who the servicer is, if that's on there, and make sure that their credit reporting matches up with how they think their loan actually is, the balance, the status, everything. So take advantage of that benefit. Great time to stay on, get a handle on finances if you don't already. The last slide here is just some resources. Have I mentioned NSLDS? Well, it's on there. There's also the Department of Education's coronavirus page, which has some great question and answers for borrowers. So there's a link there. There's that April 3rd guidance from the department, the link for credit reports. And last and definitely least is my email address. If anyone has questions about anything I've said here today or about student loan pandemic relief, please get in touch with me. Happy to try to help you get to a good resolution. With that said, I think I'll be handing it off to my friend and colleague, Laura, to tell us about what to look for in terms of student loan scams. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Benjamin. I am the Debbie Downer of the webinar. I'm Laura Sutherland. I'm the administrator at the Division of Trade and Consumer Protection. And first, I want to thank the Center for Financial Security for hosting this really important webinar. These are unprecedented times, and we're really hopeful that this webinar will clarify some useful resources for student loan borrowers and provide helpful information about how to avoid student loan scams, which is where I come in during this pandemic. But before I begin, I want to take a brief minute to introduce the Bureau of Consumer Protection. We are located at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, and we're the state's consumer protection agency. And our mission is to ensure fair business practices for buyers and sellers alike by prohibiting fraud and deception and unfair business practices in the marketplace. Consumer protection regulates a whole range of consumer protection issues. We have a hotline that fields consumer protection complaints and questions. We have a mediation unit that helps to attempt to resolve those complaints. We have an investigative unit that investigates potential violations of consumer protection law, and those suspected violations are then referred for enforcement to district attorneys and the Wisconsin Department of Justice. We have a number of resources, and we encourage you to visit our website for those that information. In this presentation, I'm going to spend some time discussing some of the most common student loan scams out there, and then describe more prevalent scams that we're seeing during the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide, Hallie. So, student loan brokers. The first type here of student loan deception that I'd like to discuss has been around for some time. It has to do with student loan brokers and what some folks call student loan debt relief companies. Student loan brokers are private companies. They provide and sometimes claim to provide student loan management services for a fee. These companies charge an upfront fee and then monthly maintenance fees to manage your student loans. Now, while these companies are not necessarily illegal, the services offered by these companies for a fee are ones borrowers can typically acquire for free from their loan servicer or can be accessed by an SLDS or on the borrower's behalf. So, for instance, these companies often offer to help students enroll in one of the income-based repayment plans that Benjamin just referenced. Of course, that can be done for free and no fee is charged, but that's some of the kind of services these companies offer. Often these companies promise they will help reduce your monthly payment or get your loans totally forgiven. But as it happens, you pay them and you're usually worse off because you're paying them monthly and a fee rather than paying down your loans. In some instances, they will make changes to your loan repayment plan that you didn't authorize, like putting you in forbearance or consolidating your loans, when perhaps that wasn't a good idea for you. Sometimes they don't even provide the services that they promise. Instead, they simply take your money and do nothing at all. So this, of course, is very detrimental if you stop paying your student loans. In addition to losing the money that you're paying the company, your repayment plan can be jeopardized because many of those repayment plans require on-time payments and not missing any payments. Your credit can be damaged and your loan balances obviously can balloon. Next slide. So one way you can identify a fraudulent student loan broker is by their marketing. Many student loan brokers claim to be affiliated with the U.S. Department of Education, or they claim to be affiliated with a consumer advocacy group. The U.S. Department of Education does not work with student debt relief companies. In an effort to appear legitimate, some of these companies may include your loan balance information in their communications to you. If you receive an email, a text, or a pop-up ad with your loan balance, it's a scam and you should definitely ignore it. And all of these companies charge an upfront fee. So remember, Ed and our federal loan services never charge fees to help borrowers with their student loans. If you're asked to pay an upfront fee or maintenance fee, you're not dealing with education, you're not dealing with a nonprofit consumer advocacy group. Another sure sign that the company is illegitimate is if they ask a borrower for their login information to the National Student Loan Data System, and this is NSLDS that Benjamin referred to previously. This system houses all of the borrower's personal identifying information and important information about their loans. And fraudulent student loan brokers have been known to log in and change the address of the borrower. And in that instance, the notices from NSLDS go to the company, not the borrower. This way, the company if the company fails to make the payments for the borrower, which often they do, it then goes undetected by the borrower and can wreak havoc on the borrower's payment history. So do your homework, research any company you intend to work with to help you with your student loans. If you're not sure whether you can trust a company that contacts you, contact the loan servicer. You can go to the Federal Student Aid Information Center. The Federal Trade Commission also has a website of many student loan companies that's prosecuted. And there will also be information at the end of this webinar about other resources for student loan borrowers that are free and can be helpful. Next slide. So as is true for any crisis, there are scammers that are capitalizing on our fears and our vulnerability of consumers and borrowers in need. They also like to take advantage of any state and federal resources that are announced to scam consumers or borrowers out of those resources and or steal their identity. So this is no different when it comes to COVID-19 and the relief provided by the CARES Act that was covered by Benjamin Lee. Student loan borrowers need to be aware of potential scams involving federal aid to help them with their student loans. There's a number of reports about scammers sending emails asking for a fee to apply for the student loan relief. Scammers were also sending emails and texts asking for borrowers to confirm that they have student loan payments and that they in fact have been suspended. So as explained in detail by Benjamin, all the eligible federal loans are automatically enrolled, and students should not be asked, nor should they pay a fee or anything related to those loans that are eligible for relief at this time. And they don't need to confirm or apply to get this relief. Next slide. So I'm going to play a sample audio of a student loan callback scam from the Federal Communications Commission. This scam uses publicly available information and then purports to have important information about the program. It then asks the caller to call back to get this information. As we know, none of this is how the CARES Act relief works, but this is how a scam is typically played out. Hallie, can you play this video, please, or this audio, please?
Hello, this is Bradley Jasek with an important message regarding the effects of the coronavirus outbreak on your student loans. As you may have already heard, President Trump invoked his power as Commander-in-Chief by declaring a national emergency due to the widespread impacts of COVID-19. New measures will include waiving interest on your federal student loans until further notice. During this time, our offices have continued to maintain full staffing levels and will continue to do so until further notice. For more information on how these new measures will impact your future payment obligations, call us back today at 855-264 before 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thanks and have a great day.
So as you can see, it's a soft request for a callback. It tells you that they're affiliated with the government or gives you that impression by invoking the president and the aid that you're entitled to. It plays on some of the public information that's out there, but it then asks you to engage with them. And that's how you know that it is a scam. The DOE is not calling student loan borrowers in order to get them into this program. And again, student loan borrowers do not need to do this to obtain the relief. Next slide. So here are some common taglines that we see for scams. These are sample marketing tags that are used by fraudulent companies to lure in student loan borrowers. They ask you to act quickly. They want you to verify your loan. They promise you forgiveness. Any company that's asking you to act before you can fully vet a program, or if it looks like it's too good to be true, is a scam. These are telltale signs that it's a scam. So you'll see they tell you enrollments are first come, first served. Your student loan has been flagged. Call us now. There's no such thing as instant loan relief. If this happens, students should not answer these calls, and they should not return these requests. Next slide. So how to avoid a scam. Don't respond to these calls and these texts from unknown numbers or any others that appear suspicious. We are getting a lot of scams outside of the student loan relief. There's a number of scams similar to this having to do with stimulus checks and other COVID relief out there. In almost every instance that the government is offering a service or a stimulus or aid, they're not contacting you. So the easiest way to avoid a scam is not to respond to these solicitations. Never share any of your personal information via text or phone, particularly from an entity that you don't know. And be cautious if you're being pressured to share information or make a payment immediately. Anytime they're asking you to do something immediately, it is a scam. And scammers often use spoof numbers to trick consumers into answering or responding. Remember, government agencies are not calling you and asking you for personal information or money. So if it looks like it's a call from the Department of Education and then they ask you to verify, then you know you've been scammed. And don't click on any links in a text message. If your friend sends you a text message with just a suspicious link about student loans or seems out of character, it's very likely they've been hacked. You should contact them and let them know, but don't click on it. In general, student loan borrowers should just watch out for offers to forgive student loan debt in its entirety or do anything for a fee, as well as requests for personal information during this pandemic. Last slide. So one thing we know from emergencies is this, that scammers are taking advantage of what may be occurring in the news to find new ways to get consumers to part with both their money and their personal identifying information. And unfortunately, the coronavirus pandemic is no exception. So DADCAP is very interested in hearing from all of you about the scams that you're seeing, both student loans and others. Even if you're not scammed, sharing what you're seeing in your community helps us investigate. It helps us alert the public and spot and avoid new scams. So reporting is important. Even if you just encounter and you don't fall victim, we know that reported scam is just the tip of the iceberg, and the actual fraud in the marketplace is significantly more than that which is reported. So knowing the issue is larger, we really encourage people to report. You can report a scam at our website that is listed here, or you can call our 1-800 number, which is our hotline, and report scams about student debt relief and also other COVID scams. And finally, follow us on Twitter and Facebook for the latest news about what the Bureau is doing to protect consumers. Thank you very much for your attention, and be well and be safe.
Okay, and this is Brendan Shaughnessy again, and I'm going to share a little more information that some of which has already been covered about just resources that are available to students or parents or borrowers that are out there looking for more information. And again, this will all be available on the slides. First slide, and the first one I really want to highlight is the FSA studentaid.gov website, and in recent years they've really come a long way in making this a really, really great resource for federal student loan borrowers, and a resource that we really highly recommend that everyone with student loans or considering student loans is familiar with. It's really a one-stop shop for anything you might need to do if you're looking to, say, compare your different repayment plans, if you're looking at changing your repayment plans, or you want to know more information about consolidating or file a consolidation application can all be done through the website. And in recent times, the NSLDS student loan database, which Benjamin mentioned earlier, has migrated to the studentaid.gov website as well, so that's available there. You can still reach it by, it'll redirect if you do go to nslds.gov. But I particularly want to call out right now at the top of the studentaid.gov website, the first thing that you see is right at the top of the page, there's a call out to information about the forbearances applied during the COVID period. And they've really put together a really detailed and comprehensive page that's got a lot of the information we've covered today, and a really great and informative Q&A section that walks through questions that students or parents or borrowers might have on their loans. And they do keep this up to date and updated regularly as the situation with the coronavirus develops, and any changes that happen within the industry or to the loans might change. They're doing a really great job of keeping that updated. For those students that have defaulted federal loans, could we jump back to the previous slide? Thanks, Haley. If you have defaulted student loans, you can go to the website myeddebt.ed.gov. And this goes to DMCS, and they're the master servicer for all of the defaulted federal student loans. I will mention that their hold times have been rather lengthy in recent times, but if you're trying to get through to them, just hang on the line and you will reach a live person, and you can reach them at 1-800-621-3115, or also visit myeddebt.ed.gov. And again, that's specifically for defaulted federal loans, and DMCS can get you any information you might need, or they'll get you over to the collection agency that may be holding your loan at present time. Next slide. And then we've also included a list of, for federal loans, all the servicers that are currently servicing federal loans for the Department of Education. And we have both their website and their phone number available here. I won't walk through everyone individually, but again, this information will be available on the slide deck when it's published. And it's also available on the studentaid.ed.gov website. Next slide. And we've done the same here for FFEL loans. So this is the list of the services that are currently servicing FFEL loans. So if you have loans that were made under the FFEL program and you're looking to contact your servicer, the information, phone number, and website is also available here. And again, we encourage anybody with any questions on their loans or what's happening right now or such to don't hesitate to get in contact with your servicer. They're all open right now, and you may encounter some hold times, but it's in recent history gotten much better, and we're not hearing a lot of long hold times anymore. And Benjamin kind of covered previously, but for private loans, there's not the same kind of comprehensive central resource to gather information in your private loans, but we really encourage you to visit annualcreditreport.com, and that'll give you the information as far as who you owe for private loans and how to get in touch with them. And we encourage everybody through this time to at least visit the site and see what's out there, because as Benjamin covered, there are scenarios where loans have not been suspended under the various provisions of the CARES Act, and it's good to keep on top of those and make sure that you're staying up to date with your servicer, so you don't end up in a situation where you're dealing with a delinquent account or a default if it could be avoided. And then lastly, we're very excited to announce that Ascendium, in partnership with the Wisconsin Coalition on Student Debt, has opened a student loan helpline specifically for the state of Wisconsin. And this applies for any students or any borrowers that might have questions on their loan or are seeking some guidance with dealing with their loans in any way, shape, or form. If you have difficulty with the studentaid.gov website, or you have questions that you're seeking an answer on, or you're just wanting to contact your servicer, and we've got our team, the repayment support team that I mentioned earlier in the call, is available at this line, and it's a team of industry experts that have been in the industry for a long time, and we're very well versed in what's going on right now, and really with anything that you might need in the student loan industry. And so it's a really great resource available to everybody out there, and they'll, if you need to contact your servicer and you want to have somebody with you, they'll make that call with you, and they can do a conference call and call over to your servicer and help you to work through any questions or changes you might want to make to your loan or anything like that. And we highly encourage, if you got any sort of questions or anything that we could be assistance of, to go ahead and give a call. We're open Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. until 4:30 Central Standard Time, and the number is 1-833-589-0750. And again, we encourage anybody with any kind of questions, stemming from today's presentation or any other questions or assistance you might need with your student loan to give a call, and we'll be certainly happy to help you out. And that wraps up my presentation on other resources available to students.
Thank you, Brendan. This is Beth Erickson on behalf of Ascendium. Again, we're very excited about the helpline for Wisconsin borrowers, and excited about continuing our partnership with the coalition. I do just want to make a couple of comments just to clarify. The call center is open at 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. A couple of things to note is that we will not be asking for any personal information about the person calling in. The caller will give us information and ask the questions, and we will answer the best as we can. If you're concerned that you're getting scammed, phone or email scam from a scammer, please feel free to call this number to get this information. We will not, again, ask you for personal information or to pay for any information that we'll give you. Again, our goal here really is to make sure that our Wisconsin students and student loan borrowers have information in their hands to make the right decisions regarding their student loans. So one of the things that Benjamin alluded to that we're very concerned about is Ascendium, especially Brendan's that are taking these calls, is that this period of time will be ending, as indicated right now, September 30th. For those borrowers who have not had to really pay attention to their student loans or make payments, we fear that more will struggle, not because of the fact they have to make payments, but because their employment opportunities or income have changed. So we really want to get the word out to the Wisconsin borrowers. We're here to help. And so for those of you, take this number, get it out there. I'll guarantee you that Brendan's team is waiting and anxious to receive your phone calls and help you out however they can. So thank you.
Thank you, Beth, for jumping in there and providing that information. That was really helpful, and for noting that borrowers can also call that number to talk through some of those scams that they might have identified, or might just have questions about whether it is truly a scam or not. So Laura mentioned that people can call DATCAP, but they can also call that line with questions regarding scams as well. So thanks, Beth, for speaking on that resource as well. And I will say that we do have time for Q&A. However, I do not have any questions coming in at this point, and I think that's because the information that was provided by all of our presenters today was so comprehensive and detailed and thorough in its messaging and the resources provided that it just looks as if we don't have any real questions coming in from the audience, despite the fact that we have a pretty full audience. So with that, I'm going to just momentarily kind of let any panelist that has any additional information that they wanted to provide jump in if they want to do that. I'm also just pausing for a few moments so that I can allow audience members to input questions in that question box if they do have any that are on their mind that they just have not had a chance to type out quite yet. But I'm allowing for anyone to kind of jump in right now if they have any other points to provide that they maybe forgot to mention, or that we didn't have time before, but now we actually have gained some of that time. Okay, I'm going to take that silence as a cue to basically kind of wrap this up today. As I mentioned, just a wealth of information, really thorough, comprehensive resources provided by this great team of presenters that we had on the webinar today. Like I mentioned earlier, this was being recorded and the slides will be made available as well. I also wanted to mention another resource that UW-Madison Division of Extension has made available to the public. It's financial resources to help get through COVID-19. And that link is provided on this slide as well and will be posted. And that has topics ranging from all areas of financial difficulties and financial topics that people might be experiencing during this crisis caused by COVID-19. And so I encourage people to go to that website as well if they're experiencing financial issues that run the gamut from student loan debt to housing issues, food insecurity, etc. And with that, I would just like to once again thank our presenters. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share this incredibly valuable and vital information with us today. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in as well. And just remember, this webinar is recorded and will be posted on our website with the slides within one business day. It will be located on cfs.wisc.edu. And with that, I urge everyone to please stay safe, be well, be healthy. Thank you.